Hey everyone, it's Tony George from DocSports.com. We're talking 2023 NASCAR. A little bit of a primer, a little bit of a heads up, a little bit of how to if you're doing this on your own. But nonetheless, NASCAR has been one of my strongest sports over the last 3 or 4 years. 2 of the last 4 years have been the number one handicapper over at Docs. A couple years, 3 years ago, I think I was the number one handicapper in the country when it came to NASCAR. But things have changed a little bit in NASCAR. And many times, as much as things change, they remain the same. And how we handicap this really hasn't changed that much. But last year provided a challenge with these next-gen cars. It took most of the drivers and most of the race teams over half the season to figure out how to drive and manage and set up these cars for races. It was a big problem. I think the first 14 races we had like 12 different winners, which rarely happens. Don't quote me on that, but it was some outlandish number. And we struggled in the first half of the season because it didn't make a difference what the driver's record was on the, Joey Logano's good on short tracks. So-and-so's good on super speedways. So-and-so's good on mile-and-a-half ovals. Didn't make a difference. You had guys come out of the woodwork out of nowhere winning races. And the guys that you expected to win, with the Hendricks motors, Joe Gibbs, all the Stuart Haas, all these big race teams that have all the money, at the end of the day, they weren't even in contention for a while, and it took us a while. Now, the last 9 weeks of the NASCAR season, we had 7 top picks. Once we kind of got it figured out, who could dial in their race car, this, that, and the other with these next-gen cars. And I don't think that the learning curve for them, if a race team and a race driver, like a Denny Hamlin, some of the big names in this were Kyle Busch, some of the big names in this sport that could not get near a win. Elliott, you can go down the list, couldn't get near a win. On tracks that they have dominated because they couldn't figure out these race cars. And the other thing was, especially in the first half of the season last year, there was a lot of wreckouts on tracks that aren't notorious for wreckouts. You're going to expect big wrecks and a lot of teams getting taken out on super speedway racing with drafting, running 200 miles an hour, bumper to bumper. The big one at Talladega, the big one at Daytona. It's going to happen again. It happens every year. But those type of scenarios were occurring on tracks where they never occurred on. So that's why it was kind of a wishy-washy season last year. But we're up almost $14,000 over the last 3 years for a $100 player in NASCAR. Now, one thing about NASCAR, we mentioned a lot of it. A lot of my handicapping goes into qualifying, but more so practice times. And I'm not looking for fastest lap. We're looking at times over an extended period of time, like 10 to 15 laps, and how these drivers ran, not only in speed, but in traffic. So we take a big look at what's going on there in terms of practice times. And that's why some races, they don't qualify till the morning of, but usually it's the day before. But you can look at qualifying, and then you go look at practice, and the top 5 is totally different. I put more emphasis on practice times, maybe some driver interviews. A lot of drivers will tell you everything you want to know about their car, the setup, whether they're happy or they're not happy. Like a Chase Elliott, he'll just wear his heart on his sleeve. And other guys like Hamlin won't tell you anything. But you can listen a little bit to them. But at the end of the day, you want to take a look at driver history on these tracks. Some guys are just notorious for running well on super speedways. Denny Hamlin comes to mind. knows how to hang back in the pack, avoid all the rigmarole and the mid-race wrecks, and then work his way up through the pack during a 500-mile-long race and get himself in contention down the stretch. And there's other guys that run mile-and-a-half ovals very well. They might run a mile-and-a-half oval at Kansas better than they do somewhere else. So you look at driver history on tracks, driver history on that type of track, that type of surface, those sort of things, how their race team is doing, how their car setups are, practice times, more so than qualifying times, average laps led during these races. You'll see a guy like, this is just a hypothetical, like a Martin Truex Jr., that may be running at Pocono, and he has led out of the last 2 years 270 laps, never won the race. Maybe he qualified 12th, but he knows how to run the track. So you're talking about a guy you can match up against somebody who doesn't have a lot of success. And these head-to-head matchups that we do is just one driver against another and a money line that he finishes higher than the other driver. That's what we're betting. Now, you always have blown engines. You can have a guy leading. I forgot who it was last year. I had a guy that led, can't remember who it was now, leading a race, dominating a race with like 30 laps left, blew a tire out, put him in the wall. He's out of the race. Over a driver that was running like 20th. And it was laying like 105 or 115 or some insanely low number. So things do happen during the course of a race. It's much like a prop bet in the NFL. Say you got a prop bet on Patrick Mahomes over 280 yards throwing the ball, and early third quarter he sprains his ankle and he's out of the game. Your prop bet's done. Didn't get there. That happens in NASCAR from time to time too. You'll have a wreck out. And last year, early in this season, we had a lot of them against good drivers who never wreck out. Now, when it comes to handicapping NASCAR and our prowess, 3-4 years ago, we were winning, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was 3 years ago. We went 19-3 stretch with top plays of 6, 7, or 8 units and just singled out one head-to-head matchup. And more times than not, it was not Denny Hamlin versus Joey Logano. It was like Matt Diambetto versus Daniel Suarez or something way down in the pack, because we have sources for NASCAR, numerous of them. They know when the tire changer for Austin Dillon had a fight with his girlfriend the day before, and we had great information. And especially with some of these lower tier teams, lower tier drivers, not the guys that had the best of the best of the best in equipment. And we knew that so-and-so didn't have as many tires as so-and-so. And just like if you ever watch Days of Thunder, tires are everything in NASCAR. So the teams that have all the money, have everything that they need to win that race. A friend like mine that runs NASCAR and has for 20-some years, J.J. Yaley, he runs in lower funded teams where they don't have a full allotment of tires. As a matter of fact, the tires they practice on are the same tires they used to qualify on, versus a Denny Hamlin who, once he's done practicing, gets a fresh set of tires to qualify on, gives him better grip, he has better times. They qualify top 5 versus JJ qualifying, anywhere from 28th to 20th, But nonetheless, books used to offer all these options way down into the field. They were getting crushed. And bear in mind, this is a niche sport. Meaning, the books, you find softer lines and lower limits from books because they're more worried about baseball, NBA, the big sports, where if they have a weak line, a big bettor can come in and just pound them for hundreds of thousands of dollars. That doesn't happen in NASCAR. Now, the one thing about having softer lines, they're more volatile. Meaning, if a guy walks into Circa here in Vegas and the limit's 3,000 for NASCAR, I'm not for sure what their NASCAR limit is this year, but let's just say their limit's 3,000 versus 20,000 for a football or basketball game. But if a guy comes in and puts $3,000 down, especially someone that's in the know like myself, the bottom line is they're going to react to that. That line that was minus 110 goes up to minus 190 in a second. So not only, so they react different, and there's huge line swings in NASCAR versus something like the NFL. If I go in there and put 3,300 to win 3,000 on the Bills versus, the Jets laying 7.5, it's not going to move the line any. It will in NASCAR. So when we put the picks out, get them in. They're every day of the race, 8:30 a.m. Pacific. But those opportunities to go deep into the field when you really knew your stuff doesn't pay dividends now, because places like DraftKings, places like FanDuel, Bet River, some of these PointsBet, some of these other, William Hill, Circa, they have apps not only in Vegas but other places where their books are at legally throughout the United States. They don't offer a lot of options. It's only the big name drivers. And a lot of times with these big name drivers and big name race teams, it's a coin flip. So you got to, you need a little luck, and you need a little this, and you need a good pit stop at the end of the race versus the other team to move up on a yellow flag with 7 or 8 laps left, and we look at the pit times and we average those and handicap those as well. But the options available to us when we really were tearing the books a new one aren't there like they were in the past, because books were getting beat up. And one thing about sports books, they don't like to lose money. And if you continually beat them at something, they're going to limit your account. But nonetheless, the books have made it more difficult, which we found problematic, especially last year, especially with the next gen learning curve, not only for handicappers, but race teams, crew chiefs, drivers, so we got a little bit better handle on it going into this year, and kind of knowing what books are going to be able to offer us in terms of, so we're trying to find the nuances between the big names versus going deep into the field, because they just don't give you a lot of options anymore. But NASCAR's here. It starts with Daytona here. We're looking forward to it. Be sure and get over to DocSports.com. Get yourself a season-long package. We're going to have a great year in NASCAR. Learned a lot of stuff last year. Where we were just kind of coasting along and not, it was just status quo to win 70% of our picks. Wasn't that way last year. We learned a lot. We're looking forward to utilizing some of that. Going to pay dividends. Get on board with NASCAR. Tony George and DocSports.com. Fast Track to Profits 2023.